Labor Union. So again, this is the first major labor union in America. Okay, so they were successful in getting an 8-hour workday, and their main goal was to kind of combine and synchronize these other smaller labor unions, but eventually they were going to fade out. Okay, the two main ones that we need to know. Okay, Knights of Labor, led by Terence Powderly. Okay, again, they are going to include skilled and unskilled workers. Okay, so we talked about kind of their common goals. And the main thing I want you to understand with the Knights of Labor, okay, other than including skilled and unskilled workers, make sure that you know that they sought to arbitrate the situation or kind of seek a compromise before they jumped right into strikes, okay? So to strike or take kind of that severe action was more as a last resort. But as we see today, they'll become more and more common. Okay, on the other hand, Mr. Gompers leading the American Federation of Labor. Okay, this was specifically made up for skilled workers. Okay, again, just like with the Knights of Labor, they sought to strike as kind of a last resort. Okay, so collective bargaining, again, they wanted to get their people as in one voice. Okay, so common goals to be heard clearly. Okay, and just a review, remember we talked about tactics of the management versus kind of the labor side of it. So just make sure that you understand that each side had a role in the prevention of strikes or not. All right, so we talk about this kind of idea of labor unions, okay? And we think of that's a great thing for workers to kind of be advocating for themselves, okay? But we start to see as these major strikes begin to take place within the United States, many of them turn violent and require government action. So kind of as a natural consequence, labor unions begin to take the blame for that. All right, the first one we're going to look at is the Great Strike of 1877. Okay, so the big cause of this strike is going to be cut wages. Okay, so if you've ever heard the B&O Railroad, when you were playing Monopoly, this is where it is coming from. Okay, so workers' wages are getting cut. Okay, at this early strike, labor unions were not involved. Okay, so this is not associated with a specific labor union. Okay, but again, as they are physically kind of seeing this bottom picture, they're physically blocking trains from moving. Okay, so this is holding up kind of the railroad tracks for about weeks at a time. And the longer it goes on, the more violent this conflict gets in. Okay, so main thing I want you to notice down here. Okay, the action that was taken. Federal troops are brought in to bring down the strike. Okay, so you'll see kind of this commonality when we talk about these strikes. Okay, it gets violent, it gets violent. Some state or federal version of the Army is going to be brought in to break it up. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is going to be the Pullman Company strike. Okay, with this one specifically, okay, we're going to talk about a man. You'll see the man Eugene V. Debs. It sounds like a court case. It is not. He is going to lead the American Railway Union in a strike against the Pullman Company. Okay, and again, basically, they were cutting wages, but at the same time, the Pullman Company basically owned the apartments that they were living in, so they would raise their rent and cut the wages. Okay, again, kind of saying not fair. How are the people going to make their rent? Okay, and in this case, most families cannot. So again, the company is going to go on strike against these changes. So what happens is, again, federal troops are brought in. Okay, it even makes it up all the way to the president who gets an injunction. Okay, so in this case, basically he's intervening on behalf of this company. And what he does is he attaches mail cars to the back of these Pullman Company cars. And now he says that they have to stop the strike because it's interfering with the delivering of U.S. mail. So very tricky, but again, that helps to break up the strike. Okay, this one is going to be a very important one you need to know. Okay, the Haymarket Riot. What is happening? Okay, people are kind of rioting or protesting in kind of like this city square market space in Chicago. And they're protesting police action, okay, from a strike early on in this time period. Okay, and out of nowhere, and we still today do not know specifically who did it, okay, but a bomb was thrown into this kind of middle of the market, the city center, killing several police officers and people who were protesting. Okay, so again, the labor unions are going to be blamed. Okay, specifically 8 foreign immigrants with foreign names get accused. 4 of them are executed, the other 4 are released. But again, the big impact I want you to understand, okay, as these strikes become increasingly violent, public begins to turn against labor unions. Okay, where they may have gotten more support from people and a high rate of participation early on. Okay, after it gets very violent, and again, a lot of publicity around this, I want you to understand the public turns against the labor unions. Okay, so participation is going to die out. Support for these 2 major labor unions are going to die out. I'd also like you to look at the Homestead Steel Strike. Okay, again, you see this is a conflict between the strikers, and then again, we talked about the Pinkertons, these hired security guards. Okay, and basically the conflict was the managers are kind of coming in and they're telling their employees that, oh, we need to work faster, 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 faster. And the employees are like, we can't work much faster than we already are. Okay, and basically go on strike. The company then in turn tries to do a lockout. Okay, where they lock the employees out. The employees take over, okay, this factory. And they overrun it, they take over it. Again, as you see, kind of the common theme, military was sent in. Okay, so the government is constantly having to intervene. Okay, once the military comes in, it's going to be broken up. But again, kind of resulting in 14-hour kind of shootout, lockout with that, and 16 people die in the end. Okay, so again, as a result from this conflict, the steelworkers' labor union is going to die out. As it becomes more and more violent, so remember, early on we looked at the strategies, peaceful protest, boycotting, arbitration, collective bargaining. Okay, and as time progresses, it gets more and more violent, people begin to turn away from labor unions. Okay, so again, we kind of see this cartoon. I just want to kind of reanalyze this. We looked at this in the quiz. So remember the robber barons. Okay, so it's Vanderbilt over here. We've got Sage over here, Golds, Fields. Again, we've talked about Vanderbilt, but not really the other 3. Okay, but these big leaders of the industry are kind of making their money on the backs of these workers.